morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. That was slightly nerve-wracking, wasn't it? For those of you who are regular watchers of this show, you'll know that one of us is missing, which is Vanessa, and she's the one that normally presses the buttons. So we were just figuring that out behind the scenes, but we did it and it played. Anyway, it's lovely to see you. Welcome to the show. For those of you who have not watched this before, this show is for aspiring and inspiring leaders and anyone else in between, really, that wants to connect with other like-minded souls, learn something and evolve. It's a totally free service. And between the three of us that are normally here and our wonderful guests, we aim to share with you as much knowledge as we can do to help you grow in whatever business that you're in. So I'm Sarah, I'm an executive coach, and I specialize in helping people with onboarding, taking control of imposter syndrome and communication and influencing skills. And my lovely co-host today, who is also the star of today's show, is Melinda. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Melinda Ward. I am the Director of Consulting Solutions and Managed Services for Helm 360. I'm also the founder of the Consultant Mentor. And we are normally also joined by Vanessa Ashworth, our marketing guru and purpose statement wizard. But she is supporting us from afar today due to a work commitment.
Yeah.
We've been left to controls, which is slightly dangerous, but it'll be fun.
It'll be fine. We've got the grown-up here. It's absolutely fine. As long as the grown-up's in, we're all good. If you are watching us, we'd love to say hello to you. So Vanessa's in. Hi, Vanessa. So say hello in the chat box. Let us know where you are. Also, let everyone know if you're happy to connect as well, because this is the whole point of this, is for you to connect with others. You never know who you might meet, who you might need in future. So get connecting, talk to each other. And also, if you want to share any great successes that you've had, we'd love to hear that and be your cheerleading team.
Questions.
Any questions you've got that are work related? We're not going into professional stuff. Well, not personal stuff here. If you just want to let us know what you've been up to at the weekend, that'd be great. And then in about 5 or 6 minutes time, once we've let everybody in and we've said hello to everyone, we'll be handing over to the wonderful Melinda, who is going to be taking us through managing change, overcoming resistance. Actually, no, we're not doing managing change. That's me in a few weeks' time. Sharing with us
this is overcoming resistance.
3 steps on overcoming resistance. So we'll be doing that. So pop in, say hello. And if you can't see other people in the stream, don't worry, because we're all streaming from different platforms. So we're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, you name it. We're everywhere. Vanessa's in Glasgow. And hi, Vanessa, just pop on the screen. Hello, you can pretend you're here now. And you may not see everyone's comments, but we can see them all. So don't worry. So just keep chatting. Tell us you're there. It'd be lovely to see you. But let's just pop over to you, Melinda. How was your weekend? What did you do?
My weekend was quiet, actually, which is unusual for me. But anyway, just a reminder to people to let your colleagues and contacts know if you think this stream would be helpful to them. Feel free to share now so they have a moment to get in before we start talking about like the serious stuff. But anyway, this weekend was a little bit quiet because I've been fighting some funky virus all week. According to little test sticks, it wasn't COVID, but it did take my voice, and it's only just returned today. So hopefully it'll hold out for the show, because up until now it's been a bit absent. Which me not talking, that's an unusual thing, but anyway. So quiet weekend, except for I've got my dear friend from Ukraine. I've been helping her find a permanent apartment. So I was running around doing several different apartment viewings, seeing some nice properties, and hopefully we will get something sorted out for her very soon.
Oh, that's fabulous. What sort of area is she looking to move into? She's staying close to you?
Yeah. She's looking to come near me, but where she's staying now is kind of the other side of London. So to travel so far with a 1-year-old who is very opinionated, so it can be a challenge. So it just made more sense for me to do the previews and do video tours and then feed the information back so that we can make a good decision.
Oh, it's a really lovely thing to do, and I really hope she settles soon. What have I been up to this weekend? Well, it was Father's Day on Sunday.
Oh, yes, that's true.
And I didn't see my dad, who will watch this later. So hi, Dad. Hi, Vic. But I saw him last week, so that's enough, really, isn't it? He doesn't want to see more than that. And did lunch for my husband and obviously the kids. I fed them too, and just had a really nice weekend. Actually, this weekend I didn't actually work as much as I normally do. It felt like a proper weekend almost.
Good.
Which was great because I've handed over the book that I'm writing to an editor, so that's gone. I'm so pleased.
Big step, big milestone.
I know. So looking forward to seeing the edits on that, and just sort of like milled around really. And it was quite nice weather. So let us know what you've been up to this weekend. What's Vanessa been up to? She's been preparing for the Rivington Ball. Saw some nice pictures that actually you put out, organising all the things and trying on new frocks. Oh, cool.
Lovely.
The red one and your red shoes again. Anyone else out there want to say hello to us? It's very quiet today.
Yeah, I think it's one of those weeks where a lot of people are kind of perhaps away or doing summary stuff, but this is available on replay. So if you have any of your contacts who would be interested in it, you can still share the link, even if they're away. They'll be able to catch up. And if you do watch it on replay, feel free to put hashtag replay in the comments or ask any questions, because we do check back on those recordings and we like to see that you've been there.
Yeah, and if you are asking questions, make sure you tag us so we know that it comes through to us, whoever you're asking a question. Last week's show was all on imposter syndrome, taking control of imposter syndrome and self-limiting beliefs and mindset mastery. So if you want to watch that back, go and find it. It's on all of our feeds. It's on my YouTube channel. And the good stuff, once we finish chatting away, starts about 10 minutes into the video. So feel free to fast forward to that if you just want to hear the goods. Okay, if there are any problems connecting in, please send me a note onto my, just message me on LinkedIn and I will have a look and see what's going on there. Otherwise, should we hand over to you and you can start telling us, how on earth are we supposed to overcome resistance, Melinda?
Well, this topic has come kind of on the back of the last presentation or feature that I did, which was more focused on consulting. But I mentioned something that seemed to get a lot of interest going, and that is dealing with people who are kind of often identified as, oh, they're the difficult ones. So you're joining a project team, and this can be a personal, situation as well. It could be if you're involved with a club or charitable organization and you're starting a new project and someone says, oh, yeah, they're on the committee, but they're difficult. Or at work, even if you're not consulting, everybody gets involved with projects and everybody has to deal sometimes with people who are resistant to whatever it is that's being proposed. So what I see a lot...
Just to chip in as well, because I talk a lot about managing change and managing communication, effectiveness and bias, but actually this isn't about just a bias towards someone. You're actually talking about people that are properly resistant to change. This isn't just a communication thing. It's something else.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll give an example of the kind of, it's an extreme example because that's what makes it kind of fun. This is some years ago now. So maybe 1 or 2 months after I moved to London from the US, I went back to the US, to New York for a work trip. And I was supposed to be doing the initial system education for a client of mine. And they said, as I was coming in to this room with about 25 people, they said, oh yeah, there's one person who's going to be difficult and they don't like change. And, you'll just have to be like prepared for that. I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes. So I go in and there's a lady, and even from the very start, her body language was hilarious because everybody is chatting, getting to know each other and so forth, because it's people from different offices. I'd all come to New York. And she's sitting with her back up against the wall, her arms folded, and a scowl on. So it's like, alrighty then. It's like, so you must be this person I've heard about. So
So she
I
wasn't trying to
start
hide it at
I
all.
decide to kind of leave some space for her to kind of, get to know me and so forth, before the break. So on the first morning break, after about 45 minutes, an hour, I go talk to her manager, and her manager says, "Oh, well, this lady has said she doesn't want to attend the rest of the training," which was a whole week, by the way, because she can't understand you because you don't speak American.
Whoa.
So we just had a good laugh about that. And so I ended up calling this lady aside and saying, just privately saying, well, I understand you're having difficulty with, my language. Is there something I can do? And she's like, well, it's just that you don't speak American. You're from England. And I was like, okay, but what's interesting about that is that I've only lived in England for 6 weeks, and I grew up about a 3 hours drive from here, and that's where, my accent is from. And we just actually had a good laugh over that, and that broke the ice with her because, in a way, it didn't remove all of her resistance, obviously,
Well,
but
it was just an excuse, wasn't it? Just an
it was
objection.
an excuse, and I said to her, I mean, kind of joking, I said, after I explained that I'd actually grown up not so far away from New York City, and, that I was, in fact, speaking as American can be, I said, "So, you're gonna have to find a better excuse." And so we had we had a bit of a laugh over that, and, and then she rejoined the class, and, there were some other strategies, which is what I'm going to discuss today, that I used to kinda engage her and draw her in, but, it's like people will come up with any excuse they
Oh,
can to refuse change.
anything at all. And often, I mean, I'm just going to say hello to some people that have been
Oh,
popping in
yeah.
as well, but often the resistance to change is something to do with anything other than you. When I used to run a lot of training courses, I used to walk in to an environment and you could feel the hostility which was
Mhm.
directed to you, and yet it was nothing to do with you at all. And so to be able to break that and make them laugh, get it out of them, find out what's really going on is so important. Right, let's say hello to some people. Amechi is in. Hi, Amechi. Thanks for showing the scarf model a couple of weeks ago. My pleasure. I heard David Rock discuss this too on a podcast. I should think he does. It's his, and it's fascinating. So glad you've got to see that again.
Excellent.
Waggy's in. Hi,
I love
Waggy.
you.
Life in Egypt this week. I hope you're having a very hot time in Egypt this week. Danny's had to go and come on catch up. Well, that'd be weird not having Danny live. Danny, we'll see you on catch
Oh,
up.
man.
And
Missed opportunities there.
yeah, Joanna Bell's in. Hi,
Hi,
Joanna.
Joanna.
And she's got her name on it, which is great. Because often that comes up as LinkedIn users, so that's all great. And Mechi's got a question for you. Curiosity about what lies behind the difficult behavior is really, not a question, sorry. He's saying curiosity about what's lying behind it is really
Yeah, so
absolutely.
that's gonna be part of what we're going to talk
Get
about today.
curious.
And
And
maybe,
also, will these strategies help me with a stubborn 10-year-old? No.
maybe.
I've tried it. No, it does. I'm joking. And Mechi's just saying hi, panel. Hello. Good.
Hello.
All right. So say hi if you're out there. Let us know where you are. But over to you, Melinda. So what are these strategies that we have all probably had need of over the last however many years we've been working with other human beings?
Yeah. Well, I've got 3 steps for dealing with it. And obviously, everybody's human and we're dealing with variables there, and every situation is different. So we're dealing with variables there as well. So there's no like magic wand approach. I wish there was. But one of the biggest challenges I see is that I'm going to show myself as a bit of a nerd, but a lot of people take what I call the Borg approach, which is going back to an old like Star Trek Next Generation show, back, I guess it was in the 90s, early 90s, where there was an invading species, and they were called the Borg, and they had wanted to take over the universe, as you do. And they had one specific line which kind of became iconic and really carried outside of the program itself. And their line was, "Resistance is futile, you will be assimilated." So when you think about it, a lot of people, when they know they've got someone or several people in a group that are going to be resistant to change or to whatever is happening, they usually just say, "Oh, let's sideline them and we'll just carry on and they'll deal with it." Or they'll learn to like it later or whatever. But that is actually the opposite and the worst possible thing to do, because that makes the individuals feel even less engaged and even less inclined, to play along. So my first step is to identify the source of the resistance. Now, this is multi-pronged. This is not only the people, but try to objectively identify the situation that is causing the resistance as well. Is this, if it's corporate, it can be due to like a merger or a major change of system. It could be a reorganization in structure that's coming out of all of these things. So on a personal level or some sort of charitable organization level, it can be the resistance could be also due to, feeling a lack of autonomy, feeling a lack of choice. So those things, like identifying that and having a little bit of pre-research, can lead you into having a really good foundation for the second step. And that is to have.
Yeah,
Sorry?
sorry. And I was just going to say, before you go into the second step, this is very much back to the scarf model as well, then, isn't it? Which Amechi's reminded us of today, which is, as soon as we take people's autonomy away and we take choices away, it's usually those fundamental things that put us into a fear response and make us want to avoid change. And you're absolutely right. If you don't know what it is that's causing it, how can you solve the problem? It's a bit like trying to sell something to somebody and you don't know what their need is. You give them the wrong thing, you solve the wrong objections, you answer the wrong questions, or you ask the wrong questions. So it all very much plays into mindset. And one thing I was going to add was as well is manage your own emotions first, because what happens to us, and I think I probably talked about this last week, is, or if I didn't, I am now, is as soon as we are confronted with resistance, what happens to us? Our tension goes up.
We get our own back up.
We get our own back up. So the very first thing is to do is to remember this is not about you. And even if it is, it isn't. It may appear to be. It's not about your accent, like your example before. And manage your own emotions first. And empathize. Tell me about it, which is what you're talking about.
Exactly, because that is the key. And Wagi has a good idea there. And yes, to do the initial communications, do the initial surveys. I mean, when I'm doing implementation projects, which is a little bit perhaps specialized, I'm always telling my clients from the very start, this is not just about putting in a system, it's also a public relations campaign. Because if you want people to be ready to take on board the training and ready to start using a new system, they need to understand what's in it for them. And from early days of the project, you can start drip feeding little bits of information to get people excited and get them feeling involved and engaged. And Wagi's idea of doing a survey is a good option as well, to try to get input and have people feel connected to the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Vanessa, so that's the problem I have with my 10-year-old, managing my emotions frustration. And this is why I laughed and said it's not really possible with your kids, because unfortunately the umbilical cord pings constantly, and it's very, very difficult when you are emotionally connected to someone it's more difficult to control your emotions, but it does work. But when they keep pressing the buttons, it's really, really hard.
Yeah, because they know how to press the buttons as well.
Oh my God, don't they? And what you're talking about, actually, I'm thinking about the courses I run to help people get jobs or stay in jobs. this is very much in line with it, is that if you think about a job interview, if your mindset isn't right, or or someone asks you a hard question, or they're starting to feel like they're rejecting you in some way, your tension goes up, and we
Yep.
try and solve the wrong problem. Whereas what you're saying is right for them too, isn't it? It's
Yep,
find out what the
exactly.
problem is first.
Well, it's really the identifying the source of the resistance involves kind of trying to put yourself objectively and not like in front of the person, just privately, trying to put yourself in their situation because a lot of times people are feeling defensive because they're feeling insecure. What are typical reasons for people feeling insecure? Well, often people think, if it's business change, maybe my job's at risk. That's a big one, obviously, in today's, economy where people might think, oh my God, if prices are going up, I can't lose my job. So that's a risk factor. But also, a lot of times, the people who can be more resistant are the people who've been around a long time. And it's not just because they're fuddy-duddies, they're set in their ways. It's more because these people currently are the go-to person. They are the person of knowledge. They have a level of expertise and status within the organization. Now, suddenly, if everything around them is going to change, and if they lose that role, they lose their purpose. And if they lose their connection to the process, that's not good. So that's why I'm saying that the important thing is to not just sideline people because that makes them feel even less connected and it makes it even harder to win back later.
Yeah,
So
and
that leaves us.
sorry, just to jump in while I'm thinking of it because I'll forget, is a lot of people do get sidelined and classed as difficult people. And actually, what hasn't happened is the leaders haven't done proper leadership stuff where they haven't given them the time, the empathy to see what's really going on. They haven't given them a really good listening to, and
Exactly. So
yeah,
the
and that's
that is the second point, is to have a private discussion with the people. Discuss, you know, objectively, empathize, say, look, I understand you probably have a lot of concerns with what the changes are going on. Can you describe to me what those are? Tell me more. And
Mhm.
the absolute key when you're having this discussion is listening to learn, not listening to, for the sake of listening, but also not listening to solve because you're not ready to solve yet. You need to listen completely to what they are saying and confirm that you understand because probably the first thing they tell you isn't the real problem. There is more back there.
They give you.
They are looking for reassurance. They are looking to know that they can trust you to share. So the first issue they raise is usually a more neutral test issue to see if you just blow them off and dismiss it, in which case the conversation for them is over. Or if you take that on board, ask another question, show interest, build trust, that will lead to more things. And you keep on asking, is there anything else? What else is there? Until you reasonably feel that when they say, oh no, that's it, that that's true. Because a lot of times people just hear the first problem and say, okay, I can solve that. And they
So
miss
your point is listening with the
the
intent to
core.
learn, not with the intent to solve, is really, really important.
Yeah.
Again, that takes huge emotional self-control and great self-leadership. I'm just going to pop over to some comments that are coming in, if that's okay.
Mhm.
Maggie, I popped this up a minute ago, but a deep breathing exercise will lower their anxiety. It will, although you can't often go straight in going, can you breathe? But it might help. But I totally,
Well, at least you can do it for yourself
you
to be
can,
less wound
absolutely.
up.
I've
And
also
if you're less wound up, then the people you're talking to will pick up on that and be less wound up themselves.
I got told a long time ago, and I don't know if it's true, but I was about to stand up and do my first ever massive presentation to about 400 people, and I was very, very scared. And the person I was with at the time, I remember it well, a guy called David Espig, we both worked at Pfizer. Hello, David Espig, if you watch this. And he told me, if you rub it, if you massage in there, there's something in there that calms you down. Anyway, I was still scared, but it just, I don't know if that's true or not. Amechi, getting used to buttons being pressed and inserting the pause is one way to get back to choice over our response to the behavior of the situation. Yes, reminded me as a dad, absolutely. Waggy's saying is more about breathing through the vagus nerve will give endorphin release, which allows calm behavior.
I think that's where what this trigger point is relating to vagus nerve.
Vanessa's got to go. She'll catch it later. Listening is absolutely key. Make people feel heard. Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your meeting, Vanessa. And yeah, back over to you.
So when you're having this private discussion, and like seriously, I would always recommend making notes of the issues that are raised, so that you don't forget things later, but also so that the person you are talking to knows that you're taking things seriously. But also, then you can go back through the points that they have raised, however many there are, 3, 4, and you can start to collaborate on an approach. I mean, not saying, oh, we're not going to put we're not going to put this new procedure or system in place. That's not the plan. But if their main concern is that, well, I'm not going to be the expert, cool. Let's work on that. Let's get you involved from the very beginning so that you can be the expert and that you can participate. Concerns about, oh, well, we've always done it this way and other people won't accept it, I'm going to be blamed, all those things. You just need to think about how can you collaborate on an approach, not a solution necessarily, but an approach, because this is still early days, remember. And then that can lead us on to the solution. And the part of the solution is engaging with the individual or the people. And part of that engagement is asking them for help and participation. Let them have some say in what's going on, whether or not it actually, becomes part of the, like if they say they want everything in the world to be painted purple and that's not the corporate colors, well, okay, but you can engage in the solution. You can talk to them and take things on board. And if people know that they're being heard, and if they know that even if what they've suggested isn't being actioned, but it has been heard and it has been valued and evaluated, then they won't feel so disengaged and so, oh, well, screw this. I suggested one thing and they blew me off and they didn't listen to me. So I'm never going to suggest anything again. I'm sure you've heard people say that. And,
Absolutely,
if people, if you circle back and say, hey, I know you had this idea and I understand where it came from and that it makes sense, but we can't do it just now because of technical issues, expense, timeline, whatever it is. But let's see if there's something else we can do to solve the ultimate problem. That is a start of a better conversation than just, we're not going to do it, or ignoring them.
Yeah, I'd love to know anyone that's listening, have you ever had a problem like this where you have come across resistance to change? What did you do, or what didn't you do, and what was the outcome? I'm just, again, going back to the scarf model. I mean, what you're describing to me is very, very good leadership. Far better leadership than most leaders offer, because they are pulled by time, stress, resources, you name it. But when you give someone a really good listening to, and you go in with the intent to hear, and you get your spade out and you go digging, because actually what we tell them, the first response is just the surface level. The truth is usually about 7 layers deep, and you have to go digging to find that out. But then if you can't do what they're suggesting, they need to know. And what I also see a lot of leaders doing is going, well, we can't tell them, we'll just ignore the conversation. Then you're back to square one. So part of being a great leader is to say, I'm really sorry. As you said, thank you very much for sharing that with us. We can't do it. Now, sometimes we can't tell people why we can't do it. I'm not into that. But how can it be that, unless it's top secret? But then, as you say, let's find a way around it. As long as people are made aware, we're not messing with their status, their fairness, their certainty, their autonomy, their relatedness, everything related to the scarf model.
Yeah.
Um,
And you don't need to say the exact reason if it's, confidential, whatever. It is perfectly reasonable to say there are budget constraints, timeline issues. It doesn't fit in with the overall objective of this project, something. But I mean, there's a way of phrasing a reason where you're not giving away like competitive information or confidential things, but making it say, it's just not possible at this time because of X.
yeah. So Maggie said the issues are in the tissues, and
Mhm.
any feelings are a body and mind heart thing you deal with. This get better feedback on resistance. Yeah, it is. It's all about feelings. It's all related to what's going on in our mind and how we feel about something. So ignore it. And I think that's. I don't know whether you agree with this or not, Melinda, but
Mm.
do you think that's why so many leaders or consultants don't actually deal with the problem? Is because they know there's potential for it to blow up, there is potential for it to be a problem, so, and they don't want that. People have got a fear of a bad reaction, haven't they? So that probably
Yeah.
puts them off.
There's that, and the risk. There's often a feeling that if we as leaders are seen as giving credence or consideration to the resistant people, then that is justifying them and it will increase their support at a grassroots level, which is actually not the case. But it's just a lot of, I hear the conversations happening when he's like, all right, well, let's engage the folks who are most resistant early. People say, oh, but then if they see what's really happening, they're just going to complain more and blah, blah, blah. It's like, not if they're actively participating and not if they know that they have a chance to have input and potentially influence. So it's a misconception, and it's such a frustrating misconception.
It is.
And
I was
go
going to
on.
say, Amechi said, yeah, he had someone who did not want to take part in a corporate training program. God, I've been there so many times.
Mhm.
We discussed, it's really annoying. We discussed reasons, options, repercussions, and accountability. This created a workable approach that respected them, the organisation, my role. Yeah, and well done
Perfect.
to you, because as a trainer, I've done training for a lot of my life. Walking into a lion's den and allowing it to remain a lion's den is soul destroying. And
Mhm.
I remember walking into one, I don't know if they'll ever watch this, but walking into one, I won't name one training program, and there were two people, one very senior and one just slightly less senior, sitting together, related, and they both had faces like slapped asses, and they did not want to be there, and they were angry with a lot of stuff. It was nothing to do with me, and if I'd have let that, I could see from the second I walked in, if I'd have let that carry on, I'd have been derailed for the 2 days I was there. And
Mhm.
actually, we got on incredibly well afterwards, but they had really big issues and they didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And so they had their accountability taken away. The one thing I was going to also ask you about was, one of the reasons people are resistant to change is there's something that I see which is massively lacking, which is they don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it in the first place. So
Mhm.
we've talked in the past, haven't we, about vision, mission, what direction are you going in, what are your goals? When that is understood by everybody and you're inspired to go to work because you know you're contributing towards this big vision, where's the ship going? We're on that boat going that direction, and I help doing this. You tend to get less
Yeah.
grumpiness. So do you find that as well? That if they, I don't know if you ever ask that when you're dealing with difficult people, is what are they trying to achieve? Because when they chuck in, could we do this instead? You can then, if you look at the vision and the goals, if it
Mhm.
doesn't fit into that, it's much easier to say that doesn't quite help us, does it? But if
Yeah,
those
that's
two
one of
exist, you've
yeah,
got a
it's one of
problem.
my key questions, in almost everything really, because a lot of people come in, and even if they're not resistant, initially, if they feel that things are changing and different, they can start to become resistant, even if they didn't start that way. So if people start asking questions and say what, or say things like, "Oh, but we normally do 1, 2, 3 before getting to this destination." I might, but we're not doing that here. And there's probably a really good reason for it. Like, technology's changed, the business has changed, things have evolved, but they just can't see that. And that is an expression of, that's an early warning sign of these people aren't getting it. So it's a better response to either tell them what you're trying to achieve ultimately, or I prefer to ask, to say, okay, well, when you're doing step 1, 2, 3, what are you trying to achieve? And they might say, oh, well, we need to get this information in the system, and we can only do it if we do 1, 2, 3. And that's when you know what needs more explanation, because at that point you can say, well, actually, we've improved the process. You don't need to do this manual entry anymore. It will automatically come from this source, or whatever the situation is.
Which goes right back to what you were saying at the beginning, wasn't it? Which is,
yeah,
we're doing what we've always done, and it may not be right, but that can drive the resistance because they don't know there's another way.
right. And so many people are in the "but we've always done it this way" mode, because they truly, because it's what they know, it's what they're comfortable with, but also they don't yet have the perspective to see that another way can work, or that the exact method they've been using, while there was nothing wrong with it in the past, it's become maybe a bit obsolete, and there are better ways of achieving that end.
And we are, as humans, hardwired to avoid change because it elicits a fear response.
Change equals risk.
Change comes with risk, and where there's risk, our brain's going, don't do that because we're going to die. And even though we know rationally changing a process isn't going to kill us, our limbic brain doesn't know that. So learning to master your mind, last week's show, is really important to be able to do all of this. God, it's almost like we've thought this through.
Shocking, isn't it?
Mechi, Melinda Ward, giving space to discussions issues also fits with Nancy Klein's thinking. Environment's approach would give a different perspective working with difficult people. Any thoughts on that? Do you know Nancy Klein?
I don't.
Friend, have you been out with her?
No, not intimately, but there are obviously lots and lots of people who discuss versions of this topic. So, it sounds like Nancy Klein is very much on the, that we're on the same
We
wavelength.
like her anyway, because she's saying the same thing. So yes, go Nancy Klein.
Exactly. Nothing like a bit of, external validation. But that leads us to the third step. So we've talked about identifying the source. We've talked about having the private discussions and empathizing, listening to the concerns, and collaborating on an approach. So the engaging is the third step. So engaging the resistant parties as soon as possible, like now. Take what they've said to you. Think about how we can use it. So I always try to get people involved, the resistant people involved in the initial strategy discussions, in the initial workshops, because you know what? They want to be heard. Now, it can work out that, yes, sometimes they might raise things and it's not manageable or appropriate within the scope of that project, and that's fine. You have to be actively leading those workshops and making a note of it. And if it's out of scope for this discussion, say that. Okay, I've made a note. It's out of scope for this discussion. We'll discuss it another time. So again, wait, I've heard you. Let's, we can't talk about it right now, but we'll come back to it. And do that. Do actually follow up. Don't just say, we'll talk later, and then never talk to them. But also communication. It's all part of that whole SCARF model, managing change. As soon as you are kicking off a project, start drip feeding information to everybody, but particularly getting the input from the potentially resistant people. If they feel, if you think that one of the main sources of resistance is someone is losing authority, that they've always been the expert, they've always been the go-to person, Maybe they're not so comfortable with change. Maybe they're not so comfortable with technology. But if they're involved in the start of the project, they, by default, become an expert again. And they can be tasked specifically with helping other people get up to speed on the new process or the new thing or the initiative. So put them in a role of responsibility if you think it's appropriate to their own personality. So if they're used to being the go-to person, keep them as the go-to person. Give them that first look at the new process. Give them that first look at the systems. Get them involved in testing or proof of concepts or anything like that. Let them become the expert that they've always been, and then they will become one of the biggest advocates for change as opposed to one of the biggest detractors.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thanks, Amechi. I love this. So we learned. I know this is for people to learn, but we're always learning as well. So keep
Yeah,
sharing.
I'm going to look for this one
You know,
now.
I had heard of Nancy Klein, but I couldn't think what she'd done. Time to think in the zeros. Personally helped so a few years ago, but still, listen. None of this is new. People have been talking about mindset and how to manage people and all sorts of things and lead people for years. It's just no one was really listening until now. Personally helped you a lot during your training and coaching. Yeah, good for you.
I'm definitely going to look that up for sure.
Yeah, one final thing I was just thinking of is not to miss when you do what you're suggesting, you can really identify whether someone is badly behaved, because there
Yeah.
are just some real devils to play with out there.
Oh, sure.
But whatever you do, then nothing's going to change. Whatever direction they're given, whatever goals they've got, they are just really difficult people. And they're the ones that you need to manage out and let someone else deal with them. But you can't do that until you've given them a fair listening to and a fair go.
Mm-hmm.
And too often I see people tarred with a difficult brush because they haven't been led effectively, or they're missing something. Sometimes it's good for them to go anyway, because once it's broken, it's broken. But your 3 steps are fabulous because they don't immediately assume that someone is naughty, bad, disruptive, difficult. They're saying just listen.
And we do have to realize too that there are often, any group of people will have some people who might be, and I'm speaking in a non-clinical way, neurodiverse. They might think differently, they might react differently,
Really
and that can vary, at times of stress. People who are normally, not so resistant to change and maybe not so stressed by it, if they've got other external factors that are really winding them up, then they can become more anxious. So if their home life is going through a big turmoil, then people can't just leave that at the door of the office.
No.
So you do, as part of the empathizing, I'm not talking about getting into people's personal baggage, but being sensitive and aware that it's not just about you. It's not just about the project. There can be a lot of external factors.
Completely.
And sometimes people who are thinking, whose brains work differently, having that private conversation with them saying, what can I do to help? How can we make this easier for you? Can go a long way. So someone might say, it takes me a really long time to learn stuff. Once I get it, but I have to be hands-on. I have to, and I don't want to feel stupid in front of my colleagues. And you know what? That is 100% cool. Let's arrange some private time or get you involved early days on testing and things so you get more hands-on time in a quiet environment that you can learn. So at your own pace. So just be aware that there may be kind of thought differences as well as people just being, it's not always just resistance to change. It can be people being legitimately concerned about how they're going to be interpreted by others if they don't adapt to the change quickly and well.
Yeah, Amechi's saying exactly the same as you. Could be stuff going on inside or outside. One thing that's really important, we're just conscious of time, we've got to finish.
Yeah, I was going to say we're in the last minute, aren't we?
We're in the last minute. But what we see behavior wise is just the bit that's poking. It's like the iceberg, the bit just above the surface. What we don't know is what's underneath that. We don't know how people think, feel, behave, neurodiversity, religion, beliefs, everything sits underneath all that. What we tend to do is make an assumption on the behavior, dislike it or like it,
Yep.
and then we respond accordingly. You have to unpick, I mean, this, what you're talking to us about.
I mean, it's a big topic. It's far more than 45 minutes or 40
however,
minutes can do.
if people do those 3 steps, they're way ahead
Yep.
of how they would have been if they weren't doing those 3 steps. So thank you so much for sharing those with us. Is there any final comment you want to make on this before we depart?
Well, I would say that I think this whole topic, we're going to keep doing variations on the theme and providing additional information. And I think one of Sarah's upcoming topics in coming weeks will be, addressing more things about change and, managing change on an individual basis. So that can give you tools for helping others as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to go.
We do need to go. We've got to say goodbye.
And thank you everybody for joining us, whether live or on replay. Thanks for the comments. Much appreciated as always.
Yeah.
And we look forward to seeing you next week.
See you next week. Thank you, Melinda. Really, really interesting. Some great points. I'm sure will have helped lots of people. Keep asking questions about this if you want it. If there's any topics you want us to cover or problems you've got that you need solving, just DM us. We're happy to do them.
Absolutely.
Between the 3 of us and our expert guests that come in, we can handle it. Handle anything.
Absolutely.
Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy sunshine if you've got it. If you haven't, think sunny thoughts. And we'll see you all next week. Take care.
All right, thank you. Bye.